Greetings and welcome to the controversial titled podcast that is The Fucked Up Man. I'm your host, Miles Statham Grant, with our amazing guest today, who is also a legendary old friend of mine, Mr. Dan Astin Gregory. How are you, brother?
I'm good, thanks. I'm not that old.
Our friendship.
I know.
Well,
I got the Friday.
Go on, what are you going to say?
I said I got the Friday feeling. I'm just being teasy.
The Friday feeling. For those of you that don't know who Dan is, I'm gonna read out his sexy bio. So over the past decade, Dan has directly impacted the lives of more than 100,000 entrepreneurs and business leaders from over 90 different countries with his work in human potential leadership and entrepreneurship. He's the founder of Unstoppable Media, a podcast production house designed to help change makers, creatives, innovators, free thinkers, and inspiring thought leaders to create thought-provoking podcasts that help to unlock human potential and address some of the world's most pressing issues facing humankind. He's more recently known as the host of the Pandemic podcast, which was established to answer the questions that the rest of the world seem unwilling to ask. He's had over 1 million views on his Facebook alone, and he happens to be one of my oldest friends, Mr. Dan Astin Gregory.
Oh, very kind of you, man. I need to shorten my bio, that's for sure. That's a lot of words.
It's a great bio. I felt like I need to lengthen mine based on that.
No.
It's a great bio. Great to have you here, brother.
Good to see you. Brilliant to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me.
A very nice excuse for us to get together. For those who have been living under a rock for the past 12 months, we're obviously going through an unprecedented period in time, which I'm sure we're obviously going to come to in terms of what's been going on with the pandemic. Today's show, however, titled The Pandemic of the Mind, the Pandemics of the Mind, is really around what I believe is a problem behind the problem, which is the social mental health challenges that come along with people being locked up in their house, people being separated from the people that they love, people being unable to, effectively by law, hug people that they love, see the people that, are arguably cliche. We say life is short, see the people that you love, being told that we can't. And aside from just the physical implications of that, I know I can speak from experience, and I'm sure you can as well, that there's been a lot of mental health challenges with that. So I'd love to kind of start with talking about just from a mental health perspective, how are you doing? How have you been finding what has obviously been a fascinating time for you, I know personally, in the work that you've been doing, but just especially from the shadow side of that and the challenges that maybe have come with it that people don't see. People maybe, if you're unfamiliar, if you look at Dan's Facebook roll, you'll see hundreds of thousands of views and hundreds of shares. And it could be very easy. And I've got friends that work in TV, and very easy to look at that type of celebrity attention and think, wow, that must be amazing. Your life all of a sudden must be like beyond the wildest dreams, right? But I'd love to talk to you about today about like how you're doing and what's gone on for you over the past year that maybe is a bit more of a shadow side.
Well, it's interesting. I'm part of a group call that I go to every Tuesday night where we talk about a whole bunch of really serious adult things, but we always ask at the start of every session, how are you feeling right now? Literally, how are you feeling? And right now, it's almost always a feeling of simultaneous frustration, anger, whilst also feeling uplifted, positive, and hopeful for the future. It is a really interesting, difficult time in many different ways. And over the course of the last 12 months and beyond, I've had to really double down on the kind of daily practices in order to keep myself, in a relatively upbeat state of mind, if I'm honest. I get my daily dose of optimism, but I also need to constantly battle with the kind of frustrations I have with the situation we're in, and not allow that to get the better of me, because my experience is that nothing great ever comes from that state of frustration or anxiety or stress. It's about leaning into those issues and then finding out how to get yourself in the zone of positivity again, so that you can be in the best positive state of mind to do what you need to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today was obviously the title of the Pandemic podcast. There's a line underneath it that says question everything.
Yeah.
And for me, that has been one of the most profound things that I've noticed in you over the past year, is your ability, courage, willingness to challenge and not just go along with what you've been told. You know, we're told at school, you know, don't copy. Yet in the business world, it's called modeling, and it's completely appropriate, right? Within reason. But the vast majority of people would probably have been uncomfortable with questioning. You know, I can speak for certain family members I've got that have really followed the letter and done what they're told in this particular period of time. How have you had the courage, or where has it come from within you, do you think, to challenge everything?
Well, I suppose it takes a bit of a dive into the history of myself, really. I mean, I've always been someone who's deeply curious. I've been, I'm the why child. You know, when I was growing up, you know, I wanted to figure out how things work, what they do, and pull things apart. And I was the kid that wouldn't believe that, you know, electric sockets are dangerous. I'd put my finger in to figure out for myself, because I was just just innately curious. And that's something that's been with me all my life. And actually it took into my adult life to realize the benefit of actually being someone who's always curious and questioning, because it enables me to see patterns of things and identify challenges and issues, but not only just identify challenges and issues, actually to use that to find solutions. So this is an ingrained pattern, actually, I really became self-aware of probably in 2018, when I really started to turn things in my life on a positive forward for trajectory after many years of real challenges, really. But as it pertains to today, in the subject matter that I've been tackling with the pandemic and such, there was this growing disconnect between the kind of underlying reality. And I've been studying the data and the science. I've read over 1,000 articles, over 100 scientific papers, and ridiculous amounts of data sheets since the beginning of last year. And there was this growing disconnect between what I was studying and what I was reading, and then the way it was portrayed. And none of that is to take away from any of the realities of the situation. But I started to feel like there was this disconnect between the realities and what was being portrayed. And it started to trigger what I call my integrity gene, because, you know, again, going back to childhood, one of the values that was instilled in me was honesty, integrity. And I started to feel like my own internal compass was being challenged by what I was witnessing. So it reached a point of leverage whereby I couldn't stay silent any longer. And I had to really think about it, because there was things that were really upsetting me about what I was seeing in the world. And it was just like, this like car crash emerging that no one was talking about or full warning, at least in a major way. And I thought, I just can't, particularly when I started seeing the children and the challenges the kids have been going through, the children at school. I just said, I can't, thinking of starting a family myself, I can't be someone who just sits and watches this happen. So it reached a point where I just said, enough is enough. I have to confront this. I have to say something just to make myself feel at ease, knowing that I said something about how I'm feeling. And that led to the first video I recorded on the subject, which just went, as you know, I spent, many years trying to get viral content. And then one video, boom, in 24 hours, reaching 100,000 people, which is more people than the entire project that took me 45 days straight earlier in the year. It's crazy. And I wasn't trying. It was just, I had to speak. And there was lots of things going on in my mind around, should I do it? Should I not? What would people think? But I had to just transcend that. I had to go through it and just speak up and say what was on my mind.
Love that. Following on from, what you've just said there about saying what was in your mind and questioning everything, you talk about data, and you talked on a video that I saw about quietening the outside noise. Social media, it's a matter of perception, right? In a positive way, in a negative way, it's a very noisy place. How do you yourself, like, what are some things that you do to quieten your the outside noise in your brain?
Well, it's interesting. I've been working with a business mentor on this, because actually when I looked at how I use this tool called Toggle, which tracks my time. I look at how I spend almost every hour of the day. And I did that because I realized that I wasn't being as productive as I possibly could be. And when I did this analysis, I realized that I was spending an awful lot of time on social media, engaging in comments, discussions, really interesting debate, observing, when I was recording content, observing what other people's thoughts and feelings were, to really kind of lean into what my audience were thinking and feeling, which is all very valuable, by the way. But it was taking up an awful lot of time. And actually things on social media in the last 12 months have got very, very dark in many ways. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of people opposing each other, and you feel like politically people are being pushed apart. People's philosophy, life's beliefs are pushing each other away from each other. And there's just been this divide and just all these arguments unfolding in Facebook threads. And I think because it's all everything we experience right now is it's a contentious issue. And it's affecting everyone. So I was absorbing all of this, and it was just starting to get me down. So I made a conscious decision to allow myself 30 minutes a day to engage, with the listeners, the observers on my show, and tune in with them, listen to how they're feeling, observe feedback, observe criticism, any haters. I just lean into it all, but for 30 minutes. And in fact, interesting enough, Miles, is up until today, I've managed to stick to that for every single day of 2021 until this morning, for the first time in this year, where I actually spent more time doing that because of a relatively controversial video that I recorded yesterday that's had a lot of engagement. So I spent some time kind of leaning into that. But because initially I spent a lot more time than I'd hoped to do before I made that decision, it was starting to mentally affect me. It was not just personally from what I was reading, but really reflecting on the state of humanity in terms of where we are right now, and this division, this fractured society, and the pain that people are feeling in different ways. It's heartbreaking to observe. It truly pulls on my heartstrings, and I feel like that we have to come together as a human race, no matter what. Now, I believe, and social media has reached a point whereby I call it. It's reached a lack of empathy, but it's digital empathy. I think that since social media has brought so much, since it's grown, it's proliferated, it's brought a lot of good to us, but it's also caused a lot of harm. And I think the elegance of empathy amongst humans is lost on social media. It's disagreements, it's arguments. It's very easy to slander, judge, point fingers. In ways that you just simply wouldn't if you were sat around the table in a bar or in a cafe or in passing, and I just feel like there's a lack of digital empathy, and we need to restore those core values of what it means to be human. And I think there's work to be done, and I'm really I want to be part of that change and help lead that.
It's funny you say that, because I'm going to talk about haters and things in a minute. I put a post out a few weeks ago, which I actually pulled down, and part of me is happy with the decision, but actually what more saddened me was that the division which it caused, when the actual everyone's higher intention was the same. So it was around antidepressants, about my knowing that, having used them, how I believe that really they're like putting my post was quite controversial. I put that they're effectively like a band-aid over, an artery that's like literally just spewing blood, and that it's not solving the real underlying problem, and that if you don't deal with the real problem, like I know so many people that are taking antidepressants that are still depressed, yet it's called an antidepressant, right?
Yeah.
Something I want to ask you about is, you talk about division, and for me, this show is really about dealing with what I call the kind of inner division, that inner conflict that happens within us. What are your experiences of having And I know there's some personal things here that we've spoken about in the past. What are some experiences of kind of division within you? And if a person was watching now that feels that they have a lot of internal division in a conflict, what would be from your experience, some things that you could share with them as to how they could deal with that?
Well, it's interesting, and you and I have both talked about this a lot over the years, is that our inner world creates our outer world. And if we're experiencing inner conflict, inner division, and we're not fully integrated or congruent in ourselves, then that can often show up in our relationships outside of ourselves. And by relationships, I'm not just talking interpersonal relationships. It can be our relationships with food. It can be relationships with our emotions. It can be relationships with the way we treat ourselves and others and things. And, from my experience over the years, I've really been on a journey of self-discovery. It's the level of self-awareness that I've developed over the last decade is radically transformed my life, because I was in a lot of internal conflict. I did have things that just didn't feel like they were, it's this kind of, it seems silly to say, but this relentless search of self. I am this conscious being inside this physical body. But I didn't always feel completely comfortable in my own skin. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel like I had, I always had challenges with my own self-worth, my own self-confidence and self-belief. And, by having those internal conflicts, it actually became a limiting factor. It was inhibiting the way I showed up in the world. And my own internal resentments and frustrations and anger would often show up in interpersonal relationships as well. And anytime I got into external conflict, it was usually because there was something inside of me that was triggering it, and it would manifest externally. And if someone was on the receiving end of that, always verbally, never more than that, and never in a major way. But there are times when I've had those conflict moments, they've always resulted from internal conflict inside of me. And if I relate that to what I'm seeing in the world right now, I feel like we're at this kind of point in time in history where the world has changed around us so much. Technology has changed the world around us, and the human race has really not kept pace with it. And I think we're all struggling to find, a lot of people are struggling to find who they are in this world right now as the world changes. And as a result, this internal frustration, this internal conflicts is then manifesting itself externally in the human behavior. Because if we're totally congruent, we're totally at peace, we're totally at ease, then we don't react in the same way if we disagree with someone else, or someone has a different point of view, or someone does something that you don't agree with. We are more at ease with what we see or what we observe, and we don't then jump to judgment or some aggressive behavior or comment. We're more in tune with an empathetic way of communication. And I feel like there's a lot of work for us to, as a society, as a human race, as individuals, to deal with those inner conflicts in order to somewhat to tackle some of those outer conflicts and divisions.
Love that. Dealing with haters. How do you deal with haters, Dan?
Well,
and has it changed over the past year compared to before? Give us an example of an experience of something that's come in, and how you processed it, dealt with it, worked through it. I can definitely share a few.
Well, good question. I mean, so I broadcast on, as I say, I have a pandemic podcast. I talk about a lot of issues pertaining to the pandemic. I talk generally around scientific elements and the data, but also the human side. And there's always various different ways that you can interpret those things. And as such, if someone has preconceived notions or biases or beliefs, and what I talk about contravenes those biases or beliefs or understandings of the world, then it may rattle someone. And, I encourage open, adult, healthy debate that is free from judgment or slander or all that kind of stuff. And we have a lot of that good quality adult conversation. But nonetheless, I still get people who just jump into judgment. They jump into slander. And people put labels on people and ideologies. And the moment you put labels on something, you actually take away the ability to have a very human conversation. You actually take the ability to have a soul-to-soul, adult, rational, emotional experience, because where there's judgment, you're immediately putting up a wall. You're immediately putting up a barrier. And I've seen that quite a lot. I've seen that more so on Twitter. Twitter's like a vile cesspit of hate. Facebook.
Maybe it's easier to track who the person is there. Maybe.
Yeah, I think on Twitter it's just this short form, straight up abuse. But it's but when that happens, I try and lean into it, because actually this morning, I was reading some comments on Twitter following some broadcasts yesterday, and I ended up in a Twitter conversation that was about something I wasn't even involved with as a subject matter, and still I got washed up in all the abuse somehow, like splashing all over me with abuse. And it's hard not to emotionally react. You feel it physically. Your brain wants to defend itself. Your ego goes, that's not right. That's not who I am. And it's like, you're kind of wrestling. You kind of want to fight back. And that's part of the problem, is that a lot of us aren't trained to actually witness when the ego is triggered and going into fight, a mental form of fight or flight, where we're trying to challenge back and argue our point of view. And there's been plenty of times where I've done that, and my ego's got the better of me, and I've never been abusive. I've always tried to debate the point around the specific subject, even if someone lowers the tone to a different level. But more recently, I've been really working and doubling down on and trying to see, even if someone is critical, even if someone is behaving in ways that I wouldn't normally tolerate in my own life circle, I try to have empathy for those individuals, going back to what we've just talked about in terms of inner conflict. If someone is behaving in a way where they are offensive towards others online, I don't believe they're operating from their highest and best self. They may be in that present moment based upon their emotional reaction and their ego moving forward. But if I then judge that individual for their behavior, then I'm I'm lowering my conscious standards by doing that. And it's very hard. So now I try to, seek first to understand. I start to probe and ask questions, and I try to understand their model of the world. Covey, yeah, seek first to understand before being understood. But more importantly than that, I try to really see every member of society as another brother and sister, someone who is of flesh and blood. We are all made of the same thing. We all have this temporary existence, and it's really hard. I try and live through a filter of love and work on my own conscious awareness so that I can ascend the present moment to live through love. And if that means withdrawing from the conversation or just simply ignoring something that is in some ways harmful or spiteful, I'd rather do that, and I consider it to be the bigger person, and walk away, because I don't need to justify myself. I don't need to defend myself, and I don't need to respond or react in a way that is simply going to lead to more damaging conversation. So as my content has grown, it's materialized a lot more, but I really try to disengage from it now, and I'll happily have an adult healthy discussion. I will, but I'd rather do that over a phone call or a video conference than just some Twitter or Facebook comment discussion, because there's only so much you can get across.
Brene Brown calls them keyboard warriors.
Keyboard warriors, yeah. And I've been one. I have, but I've learned from it. And now to me, it's about, okay, how can I lead with love, and how can I be an example to others? And it's a challenge every single day to do that. It's a challenge, but I found that my greatest frustrations, my greatest haters have been my greatest gifts, because they've helped me make that distinction and that discernment that I want to elevate myself consciously. Yes. And I want to be a respected leader, not through what I say, but through what I do and how I behave, even in the face of adversity or spiteful behavior. And it is challenging, but I feel like I'm making progress, and And I ultimately try to take myself out of the equation and think, how can I lead with love? Because other people may be watching.
Yeah, beautiful. Love that. You said something earlier about being your best self, and it's funny. My wife has a question. Sati has a question, which is she's allowed to ask this question at any point. I'm not in the best state. She asks, "Are you being the best version of you right now?" And every time she asks it, I'm like,
trigger. Yeah.
I grit my teeth, but I've told her she's allowed to ask that question carte blanche whenever she wants. And every time she asks it, it always snaps me out of whatever shitty state I'm in. So definitely can relate. You talked about ego. I'm a big fan of, we talked about Eckhart Tolle's work. I was going through your Facebook and saw a video of his that I'd watched as well. And you were talking about making sense of your own mind on the post that you put about the video. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what does making sense of, what does that mean to you, making sense of your own mind?
It's kind of like, I remember the old days of computing. You'd have to your computer would basically jam up to the point where you just need to defragment your hard drive. I still don't really know what that means, but it essentially is taking all these fragments of information and reordering them into a place that
I don't know if it made my computer better, but when I saw that defrag thing done, I was like, my computer's fixed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like when I take my car to the garage and I have a service, there's some subconscious feeling like, my car's going to work better now because it's been serviced. Yeah, exactly.
Really, they just put it in the garage and just sat there.
Yeah, who knows? I wasn't there. But it's that kind of defragmentation of the mind. So getting all these different trains and trails of thoughts and recalibrating them and sorting them and organizing them, and things like meditation have been really essential in doing that, where you just detach from the thinking and just allow your brain to do what it needs to do. In the same way, ensuring that you have quality sleep so that your brain actually, as far as I understand, the brain actually does do some sort of defragmentation while you're sleeping. It actually arranges your mind and your thoughts and your collective insights. But that Eckhart Tolle video, I watched that, and that inspired me. It reminded me, again, it took me back to the present moment, first and foremost. Eckhart will do that, having read The Power of Now about 3 or 4 times now. By association, when I see his face or his name, I just go, let's get back to the present moment.
Whenever I watch Eckhart Tolle, I find myself just...
Exactly.
Like, everything's slower, like I cut food slower. Everything's just gonna drink slower.
Absolutely. And I'll look at the tree and go, wow, look how alive that tree is. And it's just but the point is here for me, it's about coming back to that present moment and remembering what's important and realigning your thoughts. And it's easy to get caught up in the minutiae of the moment, whereas when we have that present moment awareness, we can once again see through the clouds and we can see through the sky. You see the big blue sky again and actually get through that. It's kind of waking mindfulness, I call it, where we can just move through that kind of all the madness of the moment, the mess of the situation that we may find ourselves in, and just come back to that peaceful center and just go, okay, I remember what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Back to the point, back to my mission, back to the purpose. So I'm not caught up in that kind of river of life and being taken with the tide, but actually getting back on the vessel and surfing the water and navigating my way.
It's funny. I was on a walk before we came on with Sati, and there was the whole purpose of this show is real transparent vulnerability. And there were some periods today. I had an amazing Bible study session with my church pastor this morning. And then I was feeling really good. And then I had a session with my coach and did some sessions with my own clients and felt really good. And all of a sudden, I just had this like low mood, right? And I used to, years ago, I would just sit in that. But this time what I did is I meditated, went out for a walk. On the walk, I still didn't feel better until Sati said, my wife is like the best unintentional life coach ever. She said, I get how you're feeling, but imagine if today were your last day, would you want to stay in the state you're in? And instantly the state was just shifted.
Absolutely.
And for me, like, it's not a plug towards coaching. It's a plug towards asking what I call life's important questions. Can be a really good way of just changing your state from kind of a feeling of what's not working in life to, you know, what are you grateful for right now? I'm not grateful for anything, life shit, but
yeah.
if you could be grateful for one thing right now, what would that be? And then the person will invariably, unless they're really stubborn, will answer with something, and then they will immediately feel, no doubt, lighter from my experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've almost like ran out of things to say there. I was so in the moment of just
exactly that Eckhart Tolle moment just came straight back.
Yeah, it was good. I love it.
Gratitude. Yeah, I mean, gratitude to me, just picking off the tail of that conversation. Do you know what? That's actually gratitude itself has probably been one of the most fundamental and foundational elements of actually navigating the day-to-day emotions, feelings, mental challenges during this entire pandemic. You know, every single morning, digitally, I do it digitally because I can't read my own handwriting now. Yeah. But I ask myself, what am I most grateful for? It's the first question I ask every single morning, and I will just write out whatever comes to mind. It could be, I'm really grateful. I'm most grateful for my wife. I'm most grateful for the home that I live in. I'm most grateful for the food that nourishes me. I'm most grateful for the water that hydrates me. I'm most grateful for all of nature. I'm most grateful for my family. I'm most grateful for my health. I'm most grateful for the health of my family. And it's just like whatever comes to mind, I'll write it down, and then I'll just take a moment to just observe what I've written and then just feel it. Because in the moment, I'm like, yeah, I'm grateful for all these things. It's like, yeah. And it becomes mechanical and you're just writing it out. But then I observe it and feel it and go, wow, do you know what? As long as these things remain true and I am grateful for these things, anything else, you know, nothing else really matters. You know, having gratitude for those things that are most important to you is very grounding. And what used to happen for me, there was a period in my life where I'd wake up and I'd feel negative emotions by default. It became my default way of thinking, my default experience. I was going through challenges in business. This is quite a few years ago now, but every morning I'd wake up with this negative state, frustration, anger. But even that has come back during the pandemic at times where I've just felt, you know, there's things that have been taken away, and that my access to the things that bring me joy has diminished. And it can lead to this path of frustration. But then I come back to center and start with gratitude, really drill in the gratitude to bring the heart back to life and the spirit, and remind myself that actually, as long as my head still works, my heart still beats, then, you know, I have nothing to complain about, because, you know, we can't take those things for granted. And yes, there are lots of things I'd love to change in the world right now. And there's many things I'm working on to try and change in the world right now. But that said, it starts with you. You know, it starts at home, and it starts with the very moment you wake up and you choose you get to choose your experience of the day. You get to choose the mental filters that you'll operate through, and you get to direct consciously when you're aware and you're in that present moment we talked about. You get to consciously direct the way you're going to think and feel, and set the course for your day. And, you know, if you do that every single day, then, you know, it's cliched, you know, it's we all talk about these things, but when you actually embody them and do them every single day, it's so empowering. It's so life-changing. Yeah. And the moments I've neglected, if I'm too busy and I get straight into work, I can do that for a few days in a row and it won't impact me. But I do that enough. If I neglect the habits that support me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for enough days in a row, it's all going to come back. The negativity will start finding its way in. The lack of present moment awareness will start to erode. So I have to remember these are foundational aspects. And I kind of look at like my life like a bowling lane in terms of my day-to-day awareness. And let me explain. If you've ever been 10-pin bowling and you throw a bowling ball down the pit.
If you've ever been 10-pin bowling.
Most people, I hope,
have been 10-pin probably like, they're playing games consoles now. Maybe they
exactly, dude. Some people are like, what the heck is bowling? Like, you know, yeah. We're millennials, dude, but millennials, just about. Some people are like, what's bowling? You know, like CDs, dude. What are they? Yeah, I've got a cupboard full of them. Definitely, maybe I am the old dude that I said I wasn't at the beginning. but in the bowling lane, some people have the ability just to lob the ball down the thing and it goes straight down the pin every single time, and that takes practice. Yeah. But I'm someone who's quite creative. and I need to have the flexibility to bounce up and down the lane, metaphorically. So for me, I have to have the bumpers up metaphorically when I go bold, because that gives me, I can have boundaries in my life on a day-to-day basis that keep me grounded and stabilized, but it gives me the flexibility and freedom in between. So that's why I call it bumpers and lanes. I take my bumpers, my morning routine, my evening routine, the things I do around lunchtime. It grounds me, it centers me, but then everything else around that allow myself flexibility so that I can actually embody that creative desire to follow my curiosity and my intuitive awareness.
Life is like a bowling lane. I think that has taken over. Forrest Gump, your line is no longer relevant. Life is not like a box of chocolates. It's like a bowling lane. Going on the piece you said about gratitude, I loved everything you said there. Something I found really useful about gratitude is I used to write down multiple things I was grateful for, and I found that, again, what you just said, it became quite mechanical. So now what I tend to do is pick one thing and then give 20 reasons why I'm grateful for that.
Nice.
So I could, for instance, I could pick you, for example, and do 20 things on you. And even though the focus is on 20 things about you, it deepens the gratitude, and then that inevitably knocks onto other people anyway. To have to think, okay, I'm at 11 now. Okay, 12.
Yes.
And and so there's more thought there, rather than just looking around the room and going, TV, coffee machine, wall, like roof, like it's yeah.
Well, yeah, I get to play that too. I mean, usually I do my morning gratitude in bed with a cup of coffee, and my wife is usually there, and she'll peek over my shoulder to make sure I've written that I'm grateful for my wife in the comments. But then she starts to say,
why am I number 3 today? That's what
yeah, she's like, oh yeah, exactly. That happens. But then she'll say, oh, why? What? Tell me why. And then I tell her all the different reasons why I'm most grateful for her. Nice. But actually, it deepens the gratitude, and it makes you really consciously think about all the things you appreciate. So I actually love that as a practice, to actually take single items and think, actually, what is it most grateful for? And actually, if we link that to a prior conversation we were having during this session, when it comes to conflict, I remember one of my old mentors saying to me, this is in my corporate days, if you ever get into a situation where you have an argument or a conflict with any of your team or other people in the organization, always walk away thinking, even though you're frustrated, what is it I am grateful for about that person? What do I respect or admire most about that person? Because we've talked, I've led big teams, and you don't always get, when in corporate, you don't always get to choose your team. Like now as an entrepreneur, as a startup, I can, but in corporate, I didn't always get to choose my team. So my mentor and my bosses was always saying, always think about what do you respect most about the people you work with, even if you find them challenging. And what that does is it helps you reframe how you see other people. When you do that enough times, the frustrations start to dissipate. There's always people that are harder than others to do that with, but it's a really powerful thing. And I really encourage anyone that's having issue with anyone in their family or their network or friendship group, conflict around the situation we're in, take that time just to appreciate what do you respect most about the individual, and just allow yourself to reframe and come back to that reminder, that present moment reminder. I heard a really heartwarming story of someone whose father was at the end of their life, and they'd had a really ruptured relationship. And there was this intervention, and the person was told, what did you respect most, before your father passes? What is it you respect most about him? And just by having someone ask him that question, it just broke him down to tears, and he realized all these things that he actually did respect, and that if their dynamic as a father and son hadn't been the way it was, then he would not have become the man that he had become. And often, actually, our greatest frustrations and challenges with others can actually help shape and forge us for the better once we actually recognize it and we consciously see that. And rather than looking for the bad, we look for the good and see how that changes how we see others, but also see how we, in response, change in response to others, because it's a dynamic situation. A relationship is is always dynamic. Even if it feels one way, there's always an internal mental or emotional response to others around us. And even in the situations that can be challenging, it can forge us to become better versions of ourselves.
I love that. Love that. I've got one last question, and it's a question I'm going to ask everybody on this show, and it's a question that one of my coaches asked me years ago, stopped me in my tracks, and because I feel that it's a question that really elicits a lot of vulnerability, and it's a question that is really aimed at those people that are watching at home to ask themselves, because I believe that if you can be more honest with yourself about this question and then have the courage to share the answer to this question with somebody that you trust, you're more likely to create a kind of bridge of vulnerability, which will then be reciprocated if and when the time needs it. Like I have this thing with my friends, Dan included, where we just send each other 3 words, which is need to talk.
Yes.
Which ultimately is cutting through all the noise of let's just catch up, let's talk about football or whatever else. And it's, I'll drop the next thing I'm doing. Once it ends, if I'm in the middle of it, I'll be straight on the phone. Need to talk. And it's really, especially men that are watching, if you're looking for a simple way to ensure that you and your close male friends can connect in a way that's deeper than the buddy banter thing that you might have working, just try this out for size. Like text a couple of friends and say, hey, I watched this episode, this podcast earlier, and they basically said, you know, if ever one of us is in need and we're feeling uncomfortable, we're low and we maybe don't have the courage to share, I want to create a bridge now that says you can text me and say need to talk, and I will get on the phone to you as soon as I'm available and we will talk, and we won't talk about surface shit, we'll go deep straight away. So with that said, Dan, what don't you want people to know about you? Like what's the thing that if you are ever kept awake at night, what's the thing within you that's still maybe unresolved, semi-unresolved, that you're because you're so self-aware that you can be self-aware enough to go, that's something I usually keep to myself, but you now know that actually keeping it to yourself is something that often causes the problem to remain. So what's something that you generally don't want most people to know about you?
That's a big question.
Big question to ask. You're now going to broadcast it out to the world.
I'm just thinking about all the embarrassing things I did in my 20s and think, well, should we go there? I mean, everything's documented on Facebook these days, so you can just go back.
Before you come up with something, I mean, I've kind of already shared today mine, which is like, you know, in the last few weeks in particular, you know, lockdown 1 was like an all-inclusive holiday resort. So was lockdown 2, the weather. This year, like, I'm not going to lie, January came round. Usually January, it's like New Year, you know, there's just this symbolic thing about a new year. January rolled around, the government gave us the news and I was just like low. Like I've had some real low days, excessive thinking, lots of self-doubt. I've really had to get my crack commando unit around me to really kind of make sure that, because there's a lot of people relying on me, coaching clients, etc., really had to kind of make sure that I'm really open and vulnerable and go, you know, I've been struggling, right? So what about you? What's something that you don't want most people to know about you?
That's a great question. I just want to say that, you know, I felt the same a lot of this through this winter. You know, it's compounded a lot because of the weather. It's cold, it's dark.
Yeah.
And that, you know, a lot of people get seasonal afflictional disorder anyway. You know, they struggle. You know, we don't get as much natural light, we don't move as much, but that's just compounded now. It's absolutely compounded. And I guess that goes, I just really want to draw upon, because I know I run a weekly supporter group where we get together up to 100 supporters of the podcast, and we have these kind of conversations, and people get to speak about how they're feeling, and you know, people are really sharing the challenges they're going through. And there's a lot of people going through challenges right now, and they're not the types of challenges that normally stress us out, you know, relationship issues or financial issues, although they may play a part. And if they exist as well amongst all of this, then it's just compounded. But just the emotional, mental strain of the situation we're in. We've got people homeschooling, You know, it's very hard for people right now. And I really want to underscore the piece you said about need to talk. I think what we need to get to before I answer the question, I'm not dodging it, maybe my brain is, I don't know, is to allow that space for others. Allow that space, but not just allow it to go seek it. Because the problem is with all of us is, you know, you and I have cultivated a relationship over many years where we've been able to peel the onion and go beneath. Yeah, we can talk about the football. We can talk about the surface level stuff. I mean, even the business stuff we talk about, we might go deep on the business strategy stuff we talk about, but it's actually beyond all of that, peeling the layers, peeling the onion to be able to get to the core, how someone is really feeling in their heart and soul. You know, we've cultivated that relationship deliberately over years. But to instigate those types of deep, meaningful conversations, for some people, there's a lot of barriers. So we need to enable people to be able to peel the onion so that you can have those conversations. And I'm thinking right now, I was just thinking, a lot of my friends who on Friday night right now, this is not the Friday night they would normally be having.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if I picked up the phone and said, "How are you doing?" Most of them would probably say, "I'm doing all right." You know, so everything's all right. And that's the typical response, or something to that degree. But if I say, how are you really doing? How are you really feeling right now? And I probed and peeled the onion just a little bit, I'm sure it would start to open up some other conversations. You know what? It's really stressing me out at home, working from home, cooped up. You know, I'm really struggling looking after my daughter. You know, it's important that we learn to peel the onion for ourselves, first and foremost, learn how to do that. And I'm going to peel my own onion in a minute to answer your question. But I just really wanted to underscore how we must be there for each other right now and actually proactively reach out to people. You were very kind and you reached out to me to share that piece around, need to talk and the concept of that. You know, and I think, you know, as I said in my response, I think we have that unspoken relationship. We've built that over time, but not everyone has that. Yes. So my message is to cultivate that. By next time you speak to a loved one, a friend, a colleague, a family member, ask them, how are you really? And don't take the first answer. Don't take the first, oh, it's all right. If it's all right, we know there's something else. All right. Take that as a signal to go deeper. But to answer your question, what do I want people, don't want people to know about me? Well, I suppose, you know, it comes back to the same thing, the inner struggle. You know, the struggle, you know, we always seem like we have it together. You know, I get on my podcast and I speak with certainty and I give my heart and soul to it. But behind the scenes, you know, I'm experiencing everything that everyone else is. You know, I'm trying to make sense of this moment. I'm trying to make sense of the world. And as it unfolds, I'm questioning, I'm genuinely questioning everything. I'm questioning my own place in the world. I'm questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I staying in integrity? You know, I still have moments where I lapse into old patterns where I judge myself and I critique. I've come a long way, but you know, when I first started broadcasting in 2015, I was always self-critical. I was always saying, "Oh, if I should have said that, I should have done this," or delete things. Now I'm just like, go. But I still have moments where I'm just inner critic is just pulling me back. And I have to be mindful of that because people don't see that. People don't see that. You can't see that. You might learn to see it in someone's facial expressions when they're going through an anxious time, but it's happening inside. I've learned lots of ways to manage it, but there are times where I'm awake at night thinking, what on earth can I, you know, I feel there's a lot of time I feel powerless. I feel hopeless. And I have to take myself back to the point that we can only do what we can do. You know, we can only do what we can do. We've all got 24 hours in a day. And as long as I'm focused on taking appropriate action during my waking hours, and appropriate action can be defined however you see fit. But to me, it's about, is it in alignment with my core values? Is it in alignment with my purpose and mission? Is it in alignment with the relationships that I want to cultivate? And am I acting in accordance and living out of my true core self? But there are plenty of times, Miles, where I just feel, you know, just lost amongst it all. You know, I just feel like, what can I do? You know, how can you know, there's I see all these different problems in the world and I feel the weight of them on my shoulders. I feel like I have knowledge and skills and abilities that can help solve some of these challenges. And I take on too much. I feel like I can fix things. I'm a natural fixer. You know, a classic male issue, isn't it? The masculine energy is to try and fix. Masculine energy is not separate. You know, it's different from male and women. It's the masculine energy, but that tendency means that I'm often feeling a pressure. I feel a weight on my shoulders, and a lot of people don't get to see that weight, but I feel it, and it's heavy. The burden of it is heavy. It's a heavy burden, but I have to remind myself that I place it upon myself. You know, I place it upon myself. I picked up that weight, and it's down to me to manage that and realize that I can only do what I can do. And as long as I continue to do what I can do, then every little bit counts. There is no action that is too small. You know, if we all take steps every single day to better ourselves, the lives of people around us, and the world we live in, every little bit counts. Every little bit counts. And, you know, I'm reminded through the gratitude conversation, when I was talking to someone I'd never spoken to before today. We had a very empowering, such a beautiful conversation, so empowering. Kindred spirits, I can tell already, the first time we've ever spoken. But he was talking, I'm getting emotional. He's talking about taking his son to Sainsbury's to get, you know, some things for his birthday this weekend. And that's the extent of what he can do for his birthday celebration for his son, you know? All those things he's so accustomed to do, celebrating with his friends, playing in this, you know, playing together and all that socialization. These young kids are having that taken away. I've got some of our dear friends, their young son, he's missed 2 birthdays, you know, in the sense that how he'd normally spend them. And it made me realize, actually, isn't it wonderful that despite that, he and his son are making the best of it? They're going to go and have that trip to the shop, you know, something that you would take for granted every single day. You just nip to the shops, right? But now they decide to give we have to remind ourselves that whatever happens to the events outside of us, we may not be able to control or influence. Some things we can influence, absolutely. But how we choose to respond in every given moment, emotionally, mentally, my gosh, when I heard that story, I was like, wow, you know, making a party of going to the supermarket to create an experience for your son when we would normally just walk in, walk out and not think anything of it. Now, I know in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to be forced to be in that situation where we have to create that experience. But doesn't it just make you stop and take stock of the things that we do appreciate? Because when things go back to quote unquote normal or forward to normal, new normal, whatever you want to call it, yeah. Whatever life becomes, you know, there will be a time when we do have those parties again and all this richness, but will we remember the time where we made that small moment something magical and never forget how important it is to not take things for granted? Because when we get back to that stage where we have all the things that we love and bring us joy, which many of us are missing right now deeply. Many of us are missing things. You know, one of the journal questions that I ask, and this is a challenge, I ask myself, what can I do to bring me even greater joy today? And, you know, all the things that I would normally list on that joy list is not currently accessible to me because of the law, which is deeply challenging. But it forces me to say, okay, what can bring me joy? I'm going to turn up the music tonight. I'm going to get a takeaway. My wife and I are going to spend some quality time together. The creative spirit is infinitely full of potential, and it can always find a way to navigate the present moment in a conscious way, creatively, if we can appreciate the very moment. So there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of weight on my shoulders. But that very conversation today reminded me that, again, the importance of everything we've talked about, that the meaning that we give something becomes our experience. And it's down to us to create the meaning. We can't change the events or the response, the situation outside of us necessarily, but we can change our response. And when we look for a more empowering response, we will find it. But until we seek, we shall not find. Until we seek, it's only then that we find. So I'm so grateful for that.
Winston Churchill's just joined us on the podcast.
I'm just so
if I could unplug my mic, if it wasn't a fancy expensive one, I would drop the mic. I would literally drop the mic. I'm not kidding. That was beautiful, brother.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I just feel it. I felt it. You know,
really resonated. We definitely have enjoyed B&M home bargains, Sainsbury's runs even more as Sage has grown to wearing trainers, and it's now a game to take it to Sainsbury's and let her run around the store. And you know, we bought a disco ball Saturday night, TV's off. You know, we have nightclub night in the kitchen. You know, so yeah, like there's so many things that we're doing that we wouldn't have done. Watching 4K walking tours on YouTube. Yes. Somebody said, because I posted our weekly thing, and they said, travel night? Like, as in, like, we were cheating. Like, what are you doing on travel night? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Breaking the rules. What are you doing? And I said, we were just watching 4K walking tours on YouTube of places we've been and we want to go to. And we just imagine, because, you know, once upon a time when you were a kid, you had an imagination. Remember that word?
Yes.
We imagine, like this week, there was a place in Sicily. I can't remember what it's called. A place in Sicily we've never been, and we did a walking tour there for about 45 minutes, and it was like we were there. You know, like you said, find the joy in it. Like when we were a kid, that little boy that you just spoke about, you could argue he doesn't know any different.
Mm.
So he's maybe even going to grow up with, let's go to Sainsbury's, Dad, right? Which I don't think is a bad thing, because there might be an even greater appreciation for those things. There might be a greater appreciation for bigger things, because there's an inbuilt appreciation for things like a Sainsbury's visit now. So,
oh mate, you're just triggering so many memories. Actually, I mean, when I was at university, I was a different guy. But you know, don't know what people know about me. Some of the stuff I did at uni. But there was this. We had some of the most hilarious times with my friends, simply going to the massive Tesco superstore just off campus. We had so many laughs in the freaking supermarket.
Opening the Pringles before you'd even paid for them.
I won't even go into those kind of. Yes, what did my friend? My friend used to eat the cookie. He'd get a cookie and eat it, say it's the tax. His tax. His tax. Slapping the gammon, you know, just all kinds of just stupid stuff. Really, really stupid stuff. But so much just heartfelt. The carefree experience of just pure laughter and being there with your friends and having a good time. You know, I think we can find joy in every present moment. And, you know, as I mentioned, you know, writing that question every day, what brings me joy? What can bring me even greater joy today? It forces us, when there are external constraints, it forces us to tap into that imagination, that creativity. But we must remember that the infinite nature of creativity, the infinite nature of the human soul. You know, that's the opportunity within this. Whilst we're in this zone of constraints, it's to take that opportunity to lean in and experience it and actually challenge yourself to be creative. You know, tomorrow my wife and I, we're talking about someone asked me what you're going to do this weekend. We're thinking of taking a day trip. We're going to get on the train, 2 stops down the train, get a takeaway coffee, come home. It's a day trip. You know, you got to be smart.
Yeah, you got to be creative.
Got to be creative. And, you know, cultivating that creativity under these forms of constraints, when the constraints are removed, boom, you'll be able to expand into this in ways that you've never experienced before. And when we can get into that creative mindset, it takes away all of that frustration, the anxiety, the anger around it all, which I'm sure many people are experiencing and maybe not expressing in the same way that I tend to do on the podcast. But it gives us that opportunity to express ourselves creatively. And the last thing I'll say on self-expression, I think right now, we do need to embrace self-expression. You know, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life is this, and maybe this could be a concluding lesson for us, is that I truly believe that freedom is an inner game. You know, a lot of people are talking about liberty and freedom right now and challenging human rights, etc. But to me, the true meaning of freedom is an inner game, and to be free from judgment, to be free from what other people might think, you know, to me is true freedom. And just living in accordance with your highest self, truly unrestrained, truly untethered, and being able to express yourself as who you are in everything that you do, and how you interact with the world. When you can live freely like that for me is where souls come alive. And it takes a lot of work to get to that point where we unravel who we really are and navigate our own limitations and constraints. But when we get to that point where we can be truly free inside, the world changes around you. And freedom is an inside job. And right now I feel people are, because they're separated from one another, they're perhaps not expressing themselves in the way that they normally would. But take the time to express. You know, even like today I was out for a walk. I was walking through the field. I thought to myself, I'd just love to go and stand in the middle of this. I didn't do it, and I would challenge myself to do this next time. I just wanted to scream. You know, I just wanted to go, just release a load of frustration out into the air. I didn't do it, because my brain held me back. I was also on a phone call, which which may not be appropriate.
Clearly, yeah, we shouldn't let the person know that you're on the phone to, that you inspired a scream.
Yeah, just wait a minute. Can you mute?
I feel that sometimes when I'm on the phone to my mum. Hi, mum. Just kidding.
Yeah, but we need to be able to express ourselves. We need to have that release, and do what's necessary to let go and get back to that place where you can shake the body out and feel completely relaxed again and centered and just feeling at ease and at peace. Because when you get back to that place, that's when that creative power, that imagination comes right back to you. When we're in that tension space, when we're feeling anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, depressed, all of that, but physically we feel it, and we put internal constraints then on our creative ability, let alone the external constraints. So we have to come back to that place of inner peace. If we need to release, because that's what's going to get you back to that center. If you need to go and scream in a field, go scream in a field. I give you give yourself permission. I'll go and do it tomorrow if you want someone to lead the way. I'll film it for you. But we need to be able to release so we can actually get back to that place where we feel at ease, and we get to that place where we can feel joyful again. We can feel centered, because then when we're there, then that power of creativity comes flooding back to us.
Amazing. Book recommendation for everybody, by the way, which is inspired by something you were talking there about your inner world, Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor who was at Auschwitz for several years, I believe, wasn't he, Dan?
He was,
good
yeah.
number of years. Watched his whole family killed in World War II. Amazing. Which, for those of you that may be saying it as it is, complaining about the fact that you're at home, technically locked up, you're not really, if you read this man's story. So highly recommend that.
Context.
And Astin, Gregory, it's been an absolute pleasure. Selfishly, it's just been a great excuse for me to just hang out with you. But it's been really, really great. Really great. So proud of you. Love everything that you've said tonight, dropping some amazing bombs. How do people, probably relatively straightforward, I think, because you'll probably see Dan tagged in this, but if you're not tagged in this, how should people stay in contact with you, follow you, find out more about you beyond this episode?
Well, yeah, if you're on Facebook, come and find me, Dan Astin Gregory, on Facebook. You can go to danjgregory.com, which is my pre-married name. I took on my wife's name as a double-barreled. So if you look me up anywhere else other than Facebook, I'm probably Dan J. Gregory. So you can go to www.danjgregory.com. And please do connect on Facebook. That's where you'll see all of my live broadcasts and the podcasts that we've been talking about. And love to hear from you. And I really appreciate everyone who's watched, engaged, and shared tonight. And thanks so much to Miles for having me tonight. It's so good to see you. And thanks so much for having me as a guest.
Amazing. Dan, it's been a pleasure.
It has indeed.